That's right. Well, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for your patience as we work through a few technical difficulties. I am excited to introduce Liz to you. Liz is going to be talking about conflict in IEP meetings in the event that hypothetically you ever might need any of these strategies. Liz, would you like to introduce yourself and take it away?
Sure, thank you. I really appreciate everybody coming on their very busy workday to join us today. I'm Liz Capone. I've taught every grade level. I taught for 21 years. In addition to that, I've worked in expert witness capacities in both due process and family law cases. I've also presented to a couple attorney groups in Maryland and Florida, and I'm really excited also having worked as a parent consultant to share some things from the other side of the table and those perceptions and how you all could maybe change perceptions a little bit and have some tips to move forward to reduce conflict because everybody wants to do that. So without further ado, would you like me just to go ahead then?
Yes, please.
Great. Okay. Our first, yeah, I just was moving the slide. There we go. Today we will define what we can control and what we can't control. Can everybody see the screen? Because I'm seeing, great. Okay, and I'm going to also follow along. We're going to talk about what we can't control and how to sort of put some pillars around that to reduce conflict. We're going to talk about trigger words and phrases to avoid that people may not even perceive to be trigger words and phrases, but it's how they're received, even if they weren't intended in a certain way, they're landing in a certain way. So we want to think about how those land and maybe change our phrasing a little bit because we know everybody enters meetings with only wanting what's best for the student, only wanting to follow procedures to help the parent. We're going to talk about ways to discuss data to reduce subjectivity and misinterpretation. And then we'll have hopefully some time for some questions at the end if that works for everybody. And the first thing I guess we want to talk about is excuse me, things we can control. And I think when we're looking at controlling, it's almost like I was looking at the analogy of a catering event. What are you planning for? What can you control? You can control the layout of the room, what food you're serving. You can control maybe the temperature of the room, how many people are coming. But until people actually sit down and get into the meal, you don't know what will happen. So you can do a lot of planning and putting up, as I call them, pillars in advance. But until you get into the meeting, obviously you won't know sometimes if a conflict will occur or if you need to reduce the conflict. But I really wanted to talk first about things that people may not think about that will really sort of buffer the whole meeting experience. So one of the things I learned as a case manager is to find out ahead of time what the parent knows and doesn't know about the meeting. Do they know who's attending? Do they know the purpose of the meeting? Do they know who requested the meeting if it wasn't them? Do they have all of their documents? Have they had the opportunity to provide input? Now, sometimes I remember years ago, there was definitely a student whose behavior had changed. I was very concerned. I knew parents were going through some issues with a divorce. I knew there was some volatility. And I called the mother and I wanted to know, if she had any input and I wanted to schedule an IEP meeting. And I wanted to find out from her information. And she kept saying, I want to wait till the meeting. I want to wait till the meeting. I want to wait till the meeting. And I didn't know if she had concerns about school, concerns about, his peers, concerns about if the school wasn't doing something. I had no idea literally what she was going to talk about. Come to find out, we come to the meeting. This child had what could be described as an addiction to video games, and to the point where she had called the police to have his device taken away, to the point where he was going to be hospitalized for how violent he'd become. But she didn't want to talk on the phone about it. She wanted everybody at the table. She wanted the psychologist. She actually, I've never seen this before. She took out an extra house key and said to the counselor, could you please come by sometimes? Of course, we didn't do that, but it was very interesting that when you don't know ahead of time, you don't know what to expect. But I said, okay, of course you can wait till the meeting to share what your concerns are. And I didn't know if they were with the school or with, home. And it was really interesting, her perspective, and it gave us a window to the child's change in behavior. So again, making sure everyone knows all the data that you do have, because I've been in one too many meetings as a consultant where someone is surprised at the meeting. Somebody didn't know messages were being sent over an app, or they didn't know emails were being sent. They didn't know that the parent got an iReady score or something and was very concerned and thought the child was failing. Another thing at the beginning of the meeting, please let them know who's leaving early. And this sounds very minor, but there are a lot of times people think halfway through the meeting, oh, that's right, I have to go cover a class. I have another meeting. I can't do this. If the parent knows in advance, 9 times out of 10, they'll be very understanding about it. So at the beginning, make sure you can control those things that you have certainty about. You know who has to leave early, typically, unless they're called out in an emergency. You know the data that might be discussed typically. So find out, and as a case manager, I would spend time on the phone. Not everybody has the time to do this, ahead of time, asking the parent, please let me know, where you would want to contribute during the meeting. Do you want to just have parent input in the parent input section? Do you have anything to add about independence levels? Do you have anything to add for transition? I find that out, not to do a pre-meeting, but what you can control ahead of time. And it's very, very helpful. Set the tone, of course, with a very welcoming environment. And I know it's very easy for everybody to be sitting there because a prior meeting occurred. So people come in either on screen or in person, and it's very easy to be like, well, we were just at another meeting. It can be very intimidating for a parent to walk in a room and everybody's quiet and they're all sitting there. It can imply that they've already had a discussion, and often they haven't. So I always say, go get water, take a water break. Everybody comes in. Why not bring the parent in as the second person in the room? And it sounds, again, very minor, but it's very, again, think of yourself walking into a PD and you're the last one to walk in the room. It can be intimidating. And you want to make sure, obviously, the parent knows who's on the team and just that they are very, very welcome. Even if it's going to be a meeting that may not have a lot of positivity. It may be a manifestation meeting. It may be a placement meeting. It may be an eligibility meeting. It may be a meeting to say the child is not eligible. Whatever it is, have that just, we're really glad you're here. Thank you for taking time off work. We know you adjusted your schedule. Really show that as appreciation and respect. It really goes a long way to softening the blow of any data that is shared later. Here's a big one: no surprises. If a parent hears something for the very first time during a meeting, they have to process that. So sometimes it's not just the parent, it's other people on the team. They've never heard that the child refused to do their standardized testing. They never heard about the bullying incident at recess that the parent tried to call them. They didn't know that the child has been avoiding class and trying to go to the nurse multiple times, a month, whatever. So it's really important that if we have data ahead of time, that the parent knows about it. Very, very important. No surprises. And this is one that I think is a sleeper. Often people turn to the parent at 2 points during the meeting. This is what I usually see. The 2 points are at the very beginning. Well, do you have any concerns? And the parent may or may not be comfortable sharing that, or during the parent input section. Do you have anything you want to add about homework, strengths, or preferences? I really think it's very, very valuable to integrate parent information all throughout the meeting. What about present levels and independence? What about work habits? How are they when they're doing their homework? Do they have perceptions to share about school when they get home? Really let them know you can contribute anytime during the meeting. So just that permission, that verbal sort of acknowledgement that we're not just going to solicit your input at the beginning and during the parent input section. We're going to solicit it during transition. We're going to solicit it all throughout the discussion. It's a team, and we want to hear from everybody. So we want to know everybody's perceptions. We want to hear from everybody. Often the parent just having that platform to say, well, at Cub Scouts, I see this. At church, I see this. I ask questions like, if you're out at Outback, you're at Panera Bread, does your child order off the menu or do you order for them? Do they pick out their clothes? I want to know those things. You'd be surprised. We have very, very, yeah, I want to say higher functioning students, and the parents are like, no, 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 I always go to Target and Kohl's and I tell them, you're going to wear this or that. And no, they do, or they do feed the dog, or they are on a travel soccer team, whatever it is, get that data from the parent. That can really help that bridge of, oh, that's something you can talk about the next time you see the parent. Next time you see the parent at drop off and say, hey, how's soccer going? That lets them know you care, you remember. And again, you're framing all of this because you're in a discussion that may have some points of disagreement. So you want to have as many points of commonality as possible. Always include strengths, and this is one, excuse me, that you would be surprised how often this doesn't happen. No one says anything positive because they believe the purpose of the meeting is to determine, is the child eligible? Does the child have a, need for specialized instruction? So people shy away a little bit from strengths, except in the strength section. They may say, well, they're really good at reading comprehension and they're good with writing when they have an organizer, and they leave it at that. Really look at every part of the child. Look at, are they kind to peers on a field trip? Are they curious if there's a, an assembly? Do they listen when they're supposed to line up? Are they social at lunch? Find out all that information about a child ahead of time. Again, not to negate a need for special education, but to show the parent you took the time, you want to know about their child, you're looking at the whole child, and you can use some of those strengths to help them. If they're creative and they love going to the zoo, when they're going to get, choose books at the media center, and they typically don't have an interest in reading, oh, good, maybe that teacher can pull some books on animals. Are they really empathetic with a younger sibling? That's really, really helpful. I had a student one year who was so quiet and I couldn't really get any information out of her on her hobbies or her interests, and she was new to the school. She was, they had just moved from another country, super well behaved, very quiet, would do her work. So I asked her mom, I said, I'd really like to know more about her, background and her skills and her preferences. She said, well, she spends a lot of time at home with her little sister who has a very, very severe disability. So she really just likes to help with her. She reads to her, and it was really interesting. So sometimes we were talking about a book about sisters or siblings, then I know she can be included. Find out, is that child doing chores? That's a great thing to compliment a parent. If you can find things to compliment a parent on during a meeting, those are extra points. Oh, they do walk the dog 3 nights a week. They do help out with setting the table when, grandma comes over. I remember one young man, one of the last years I was in person teaching, and he had a little bit, his behavior wasn't perfect. Sometimes he had a little bit of chip on his shoulders, like some of our friends do. And finally I asked him, I said, who do you live with? And who do you care about the most in your house? I said, it doesn't matter to me. I just want to know. And he said, my grandmother and my chihuahua. So it was really interesting. He lived with his parents, his grandmother, and his chihuahua. So then I knew. I said, why your chihuahua and why your grandma? Well, my grandmother listens to me and I love dogs. And this kid, the kind of this big, sort of like I've got bravado, and different teachers would say he's wandering the halls. He would he would actually try to do live streaming during class, to the point where it was like, he's like, you can just call me, and then his first name, so and so, go live. That's my new name, Miss Capone. Like, he really wanted to press some of those teachers. But I found out, wow, he loves his grandmother and he loves his chihuahua. So the next time one of the teachers told me, and I don't think I was his case manager, I was a co-teacher, that I needed to call home to say something. I said, oh, by the way, I really think it's great that he loves his grandmother. And the mom said, oh, thank you for saying that. I'm trying to help him, stay home more. He's running around with his older cousin who's not a good influence. He's running around with my ex-husband, and I'm really trying to find things to keep him home. And, I'm going to give him more responsibility for the Chihuahua. So again, the Chihuahua and the grandmother, it might seem like a minor thing, but it was a way for the parent and I to bond when I was calling about behavior. So when the mom comes into the meeting, we can say, how is so-and-so doing at home with his chores? And she has a chance to say, he's very responsible. He likes to help. So then it's framed, so then it's not 100% negative. So then when they do hear those negative points, they haven't just heard that today. The conversation is about the whole child. We're going to switch up and talk about things in meetings that are out of your control. Excuse me, because we spent a lot of time talking about things you can control, both during the meeting, and we'll get into some phrases and things like that. We never know, and sometimes we're very surprised when parents say the opposite of what we're expecting. We're saying, we see this, this, and this in your child, and we think that's a celebration. And then they say, oh, I've never seen that at home. I wonder, is somebody helping him? Is the para doing his work for him? Is a peer doing his work? Because I don't see that at home. So there's a distrust issue. Or it's the opposite. The teacher and the staff does not see the behavior, and the teacher says, I see that independence level. They can do that in homework. They can do that when they have a tutor. They do that when they're working with their dad. And then you have the disagreement. So you have something where the parent sees something at home and the school doesn't. The school either has a concern or does not have a concern, and the parent has different data points. So there's a couple things you can do. You can say, oh, wow, of course, thank you for that information. Again, it's very important to stay polite, have decorum. Having done the number of cases I've done, it's really interesting that in court cases, you can have a lot of, I don't want to say vitriol, you can have a lot of disagreement, but the hearing officer or the judge or the administrative judge, or in like family law, the judge, there's still the decorum. So we still have to go, well, thank you for sharing that information. So if the parent says, well, I don't see that at all, they're not doing that at home, or I know they have this skill, they do have that at home, first thing we can always say is, thank you for sharing. That's so helpful. Even if we disagree, we can stay polite and say, thank you for sharing. That is so helpful. Then we want to know, I don't want to say trust and verify, say, oh, anything you want to share that you write down about that would be so helpful for our team. So again, if the parent sees something different, there's a reason they see something different. So again, we don't want to go, well, we don't see that at school. We've never seen that. So we can't put it in the IEP, because the only things we put in the IEP are things that we see at school. How about instead we can say, wow, that would be really great data that they're doing this 2-digit multiplication with the tutor, or they're reading, above grade level, below grade, whatever it is. If we can get that consistency with their data sort of coming together with the team, the school-based members of the team data, then you have more of an opportunity to get a thorough picture of the child, because that's our purpose, to get the thorough picture of the child. So if they're seeing something totally different, and there's always a reason. Is the student just having better rapport with the tutor? How much work is the tutor really doing? So sometimes it's, wow, if you ever feel comfortable, could you audio tape your child doing that? And we, at school, if you ever want to come in and observe so we can really see this, so it's not, oh, we don't see that at school. It's, wow, that's interesting. Thank you for sharing. Another thing out of your control, they had a bad experience with a prior team. A prior team maybe either rushed them, didn't listen to them, didn't take their concerns seriously, told them they would go collect more data, even if they suspected a disability, you can come back. So sometimes they're bringing in, for lack of a better term, that baggage, and they're coming in with a view of how IEP teams go, how IEP meetings are run. So you have no control over that. You weren't part of that. You're your team. So you have to assure them, Well, this team takes everybody's opinion into consideration. This team, you're a full part of. So if they say, well, at my other team, I told them that he was independent and did chores and is able to, do this fine motor task, and they didn't put that in the IEP. Well, we're going to put it in the IEP now. So that's really important. Validate their concerns. We weren't there. We didn't know. We have no control over that meeting. But from this point forward, here's how it's going to go. Because if they know you're about problem solving, you're about fixing things, you're about not rushing them and taking the time, and you're about truly listening, that does a lot for it, those times when they will disagree at some point. So these soften the blow. Okay. Another one, they're getting information that you were not aware of. So it may have been, they're getting messages on an app, they're getting attendance information, whatever it is. So really finding out, oh, well, could you share more about that? And sometimes team members are blindsided because they didn't know so and so is messaging them. The child's behavior is this. Please come and get your child, XYZ. So again, validating. Oh, again, very polite. Thank you for sharing that. That's so important that you're able to share that. That's really great information. Do you mind sharing that information specifically? And then one of the last ones that's not in your control, this is a big one. This is a big one that can come up in multiple different types of IEP meetings. They have an expectation that doesn't match the data. It could be for services. It could be for placement. It could be for which eligibility category that they might qualify for. And again, when we focus on the data tells us a story, and well, we kind of have to follow the data. This is our requirement. I remember one year I was a team leader in a school. A child was getting A's and B's. Again, I'm not breaching confidentiality or saying anything like that. They had an advocate. One of my very few experiences as a school team member having an advocate there. I didn't find any educational disability that I was suspecting. In no way, shape, or form was the child struggling in school. They came in and they were like, we really want an IEP. We really think the child has learning disability. And I think the advocate had led them astray. Oh, I'm sure you can tell them you're working with her on homework every night, and that's why she's getting A's and B's. We didn't see any reason to assess or move forward. And that's what I told the parent. And the parent got very upset. And I said, this would be the same if I randomly took a child out of a classroom and said that child is going to qualify for a learning disability category based on the data. The data doesn't support it. I said, if I'm audited, if the state comes in and audits me and says you found this child eligible, I said the data doesn't support it. It's not that you don't have concerns, but based on the criteria, it's not, okay, I'm telling her, no, you're wrong, your child doesn't qualify, you're not valid. It's the data. The data is telling me that that's the decision that I have to make. So if their expectation is for a different placement and the child is thriving in a less restrictive or different placement, either way, either up or down the continuum, the data needs to match their expectations, or we're not doing what we need to do with fidelity. And often when we make it about the data and not about my opinion, your opinion, it does soften the blow. I know this goes without saying, but parents often suspect this, and there are a couple words we're going to look at later. I know it's very tempting. A lot of people try to do a little huddle, do a little corral, or what are we going to say? What do you guys think is going to be the outcome? What disability do you suspect? Do you think this or that? It has to be that team meeting that day. You don't know what's going to be said that day. You don't know what the parent's going to say, the gen ed teacher, the special ed teacher. So everything has to be redone anyway. So we're going to get to this more in a minute. But if they hear we in a meeting and they haven't heard from every single person in the room, then they know there was a pre-meeting. They're really, I find, not very efficient because, again, you're looking at the data as a group for the first time. It's almost like if a PD, activity was doing a learning walk, and then you're having a debrief, and you have a mini debrief, and then another debrief. It's really duplicative. So this is a big one of running out the clock. This could have the implications of we took the time and we were very careful about reading. A lot of the parents have read the documents. Then last few minutes, there's a big rush. We only have 10 minutes. We've got to get to eligibility and placement, and we'll do LRE maybe next week. So it's been a slow pace, and then boom, you're running out it's the last few minutes and you've got to rush and get through things. Instead, plan for a break, plan for your pacing, and ask the parent, do you need us to read all of this, or did you have an opportunity to read at home? Because we want to give enough time for discussion. Not having enough time for discussion and taking a lot of time to have documents read to them frustrates parents. It just does. And I'm sure people have seen this where they're like, wait a minute, we still have to talk about LRE services and ESY. And you're telling me that it's 10 minutes left and so has to leave. So if you need to break, regroup, and then say, okay, the second half, here's what we're going to get done. Or we're not going to, I think parents would much rather hear the last 10 minutes. You know what? We're not going to get to LRE today. We're not going to get to ESY today. However, we're going to schedule this as soon as possible so that you're given the time you need to get through it. It's much better to plan for, have that break, come back, get the discussion done, have a break halfway through the meeting for 5 minutes, and then say, you know what? We read those documents. We got through those. Now we're going to get through some decisions. And you may not get through all those decisions, whatever the order of the meeting has been. Maybe you are still working on goals and services is going to be fairly quick or not. Sometimes it's not quick. And then, of course, ESY, that can be a few minutes or much longer, depending on if they're critical life skills in the IEP. So planning and allowing for enough time, take that break, have people regroup, but the running out the clock where the parents are told 10 minutes before the meeting that you have to get through 3 agenda items, it can really be something that can trigger a parent, and it's something you can control. This is a big one, and I see this in multiple states, where people are describing student behavior and there isn't data that's observable and measurable to back it up. And they slip into those present levels. They slip into those teacher reports. So really telling our teams, and they don't even realize it, Alina is unmotivated. Scott is disrespectful by XYZ. If Franny would just be a little less hyper. Sometimes James is silly during morning meeting and I can't get him to focus and whatever. The parent is going, I'm hearing negativity. So it is something you can control. So we're going to talk about nouns and verbs instead of adjectives. Nouns and verbs are everybody's friends. Adjectives just leave up, things to speculation. So if somebody walks into a PD session and they're late because they got a call from their child's doctor or their child's daycare, and somebody from the central office doesn't understand that there was an emergency, or maybe there was an emergency with a child, they may think, why is that staff member walking in late? And they're looking at their phone. That's disrespectful. So that's an example of an adult's behavior being misinterpreted. So just as an adult's behavior can be misinterpreted, a child's intentions and behavior can be misinterpreted. So we don't want to say disrespectful because it's really, to me, open up to so many different ways to interpret that. Instead, what we want to look at is, sorry, I want to go back. We're going to come back to this. Instead of saying disrespectful, he got out of his seat 6 times. Is that disrespectful? Yes or no? Or does he have ADHD and he couldn't help it? Or did he get up and get in somebody's face and say, I'm not doing this work. I think this assignment is worthless. Okay, just put the quote down. Let everybody interpret that as they will. Okay, we're going to get back to this in a second, though. I do want to go on to keywords to avoid. I know these all sound good, and maybe they've even been in trainings, but the second 2 points are heard in a certain way. Typically, it's not what you're saying right then, it's what was said just before these things. Just before these things, parents may be told something they didn't want to hear. Parents may be told something they don't agree with. Parents may be told something that they're wondering, where is that coming from? Why do you want this other placement? Why don't you want this one-on-one support? Why do you want him in self-contained X amount of the time? Why do you think he needs a behavior plan when I don't see anything at home and he's fine? And then somebody on the team says, without even thinking, we just want what's best for, Sarah. We just want what's best for Johnny. I think that's a given, and I don't think it lands appropriately a lot of the time because the parent, that's a given. Everybody is there, they're dedicated, they're wonderful, they want to be working with children. We didn't take, pay cuts and go into this field where we're working unpaid overtime because we don't love kids. We all love kids and we all want what's best for kids. So it's usually not said in the context of being following a sentence that the parents agree with. It's usually said to counteract something the parent is saying, like, well, I really want this testing done, or I really don't think he needs a behavior plan. I really think he should stay in jail, whatever it is. And then someone says, because nobody has anything else to say, and they want to say something, well, we all just want what's best for him. And then the parent is thinking, well, I want what's best for him too. Of course, the parent wants what's best. We have to assume that. We have to assume that grace, assume they want what's best. So we're going to assume that. So instead of that, what we can say is we want to have effective programming so that James can achieve the maximum amount possible. We want to put supports in place so he can thrive because we know we just heard some amazing things you shared with us about his strengths at home. We want to see these present levels really turn into amazing goals. We want to see how much he can improve based on our strategies. So those are just some alternate phrases to use instead of we just want what's best. Another one that I think, again, people don't realize it when they say it, there's no malice, they're just trying to be helpful. They're just trying to give the parent justification for their reasoning. And they say, in my professional opinion, everybody's there is a professional. We all have our degrees, we have our masters, whatever. Everybody's a professional. OT is licensed, et cetera, et cetera. It's a given from the parent's perspective that the person talking is giving their professional opinion. So when that's said, it almost implies to the parent, you're not a professional, you're in a different category, you just have the parent's perspective. So instead of that, just say, this is a team decision, everybody's voice is heard, you have a lot of data that you have from us at home, thank you for sharing. Again, that's different than separating us from the parent in our professional opinion. And again, people don't intend, they're trying to be helpful when people say this. They're trying to say, oh, here's what this is based on. Here is why I'm thinking this. I'm thinking this because I'm a licensed OT. I'm not a licensed. I'm thinking this because I'm a licensed psychologist. I'm not. I'm a teacher. So I'll say, but you can say things like, based on giving 100 Woodcock Johnsons, this is what I think. Based on doing hundreds of student observations, this is what I think. If you can give specific examples instead of in our professional opinion, it just lands better with the parent. This goes back to some things that were not helpful because they're not specific and they're hard to prove. I think the biggest one on this page, on this slide, is the refusal. Refusal is it's just an explosive word. I don't recommend people use it. I think people should say what the student does or says. If the student says, I'm not doing this expletive deleted work today, I don't feel like it. Write that down. That's a quote. Leave it where it is. Leave that quote where it is. If they push the paper away, are they hungry? Are they tired? Are they confused? Or do they not understand the directions? Did someone just bully them in the hall? we don't know. When they say they refuse to do their work, again, say somebody is coming into PD and they have something on their mind. They were just told, I remember going in one day, starting in a new school, very first day of school, I went out to check my car, and somebody had backed into my car to the point I couldn't even open the driver's side door. So I'm very upset. I'm going into the office, you know, and I think I had to be in a different meeting or something. And so if somebody saw me, they'd be like, oh, that person looks distracted. That person is, refusing to go where they're, and I'm going to the office and I'm going, is there a camera? Again, we want to give the child grace. If they're saying, I will not do the work, write that down. Talking about effort, talking about what they should do. Well, little Jimmy, he needs to self-advocate more. Let's put the data in. How many times, and self-advocacy is very controversial within it on its face, because a lot of children that's difficult for them to go up and say, I need help with this. I don't understand this. They don't even know what they don't understand or what they don't need help with. So again, I hear that they need to self-advocate more. That puts it on them. I'm not saying they do or don't, but what is the data? The data is the child has sat there, did not ask for help when we said, do you understand? Yes, I do. And then did not do the work. Write that down. Write down the nouns and verbs. They're not willing. They don't apply themselves. Again, the parent hears that and they're saying, you're making a judgment about my child. Instead of saying, wow, we really saw Sheila do an amazing job in social studies with her presentation, I would really like to see that skill transferred over to English. I really want to see, maybe we can put supports in because it sounds like she's doing a great job at home also. So instead of saying she's doesn't apply herself, again, that sort of is putting it on like, oh, your kid isn't doing what they're supposed to do. Can you do something about that? Or they're just not willing, unless Chelsea said, I am not willing to do this. I do not want to do this. Maybe they don't understand it. So again, we don't want to be subjective. We want to write down exact things we observed and let the parent interpret it. Let the parent go, oh my gosh, that happens at home too. When I say, it's time, we're getting ready to go to travel basketball, and you say, and then Johnny said, I don't feel like going. I'm not packing or whatever. So the parent often takes information on, okay, the child said, I don't want to do my work today. Leave it at that. Let the parent decide any sort of subjective judgment on that. These are some trigger words, and I'm just watching my time, and I want to make sure we have time for questions that you may say and not know that they are trigger words. But what they imply and lead to is what the parent hears. So the parent may say, well, can we do this testing early? Can we try this other support? Can we not use that behavior plan? I don't think we really need this. I don't understand why he's suspended. I don't understand why he can't, have this other support, whatever it is. The words can't and won't and don't, because it just shuts everything down. We can't do that. We won't do that, and we don't do that. When really somebody means the policy does not allow us to do that. The policy prevents. I would have so many kids come up and they'd say, Miss Capone, can you buy me something from the candy machine? And I'd say, I can't do that because then I have to buy it for everybody. And they go, okay. And they understand and they go away. I would tell them why. Tell them why. Not just a blanket, we won't, we don't, we can't. Is it based on something the central office told a teacher? Is it based on a state policy? Is it based on IDEA? Is it based on something else? Somebody might say, well, I would like the ESY bus to drop them off, 2 counties away where the baby, that's a ridiculous example, but something where, okay, there's a reason for our decisions. We didn't pull that out of the air. We can't do that. We won't do that. They'll say, okay, you can go ahead and pull him during art class for reading support. He doesn't really like art. Well, no, we don't do that at this school. We provide the support here. Okay, well, could he just eat lunch back in the classroom? He won't bother anybody. Well, the teacher has their planning time during a certain time and there's nobody to supervise them. So here's the reason that wouldn't work. And it softens the blow of any request. Or you can say the data doesn't support that. The data just doesn't support it. And again, I go back to, if I picked a random student out of class and said, okay, I'm going to allow that student to go eat lunch in an empty room. I can't do that. So I can't do that if the parent requests it. It's against a policy. So know the policies. Of course, you all know them because you are the experts, but no. So instead of the parent hearing, we can't do this, we won't do that, we don't do that, you frame it with, wow, you have a very valid request. I understand the purpose of your request. However, we're faced with having to honor the policy of this. Like the interview's coming up, the parent's like, we're going out of the country for 3 weeks. We want to do it when we come back. Well, unfortunately, we have compliance deadlines, so we have to meet, we can't wait until you get back. We can do the meeting by phone. So, we really need to work with you. Of course, it's going to be at a date and time convenient to you. Here's what we can do, and problem solve with them. When they hear can't, won't, and don't, it kind of shuts down the flow of the meeting. And we don't want to have that. We want to have, well, here's why. Well, we can't do that. We can't have this go on for this reason, and then tell them why. And many, many times they're like, oh, well, I didn't know there was a policy about that. I didn't understand that. Whenever a policy changes and parents don't understand and it inconveniences them, I'll never forget one year, it was a very large Maryland county, and the new rule was parents had to show ID to drop off their child. And because there had been an incident at a school and there was a lot of publicity, and there were, I guess, visitors to the school or a volunteer, and there were things actually like untoward towards criminal behavior going on in one building in a very large county. So across the board, they said no parent can even literally walk their child to the classroom unless they show ID. When I tell you that you have 900 students in that building, and I was on breakfast duty, and this was the day after the policy, it was the beginning of the year, the principal grabbed a couple of us and they said, we can't have 900, all these parents, so many of these parents want to drop their kids off. It's like the first day, first week of school. So our job was to literally check IDs and give them a pass, that one of the staff, and we ran out of paper. And the parents were understandably very, very upset. And this county ended up changing this policy like whatever later. But this is the first week of school. And it was in the all-purpose room. And I looked up and I just had surgery a few weeks earlier. And I looked up and there was just a sea of parents, and they were upset, understandably, and they were like, why are we doing this? I'm like, it's not us, it's the county, it's the policy. I really sorry, I'm writing them a pass, and they're going, writing them a pass, and then I ran out of paper, or I ran out of the passes, and I took like literally notebook paper, and I'm like, ID checked, Miss Capone. And again, they weren't, a few of them were very upset with us because, we're the ones telling them, but this wasn't the school, this was the county. So we told them the reason, and then that made it a little more palatable to them. Knowing when to redirect and pivot is really, really important in the meeting. So if you're hearing something, or hearing maybe things for the first time, or wondering, you want more information, be able to redirect and pivot. Be able to look at this piece of data and go, that might not be consistent with these other things, and check that time agenda, and then say, oh, I really appreciate you sharing that. We also want to allow so-and-so to take a few minutes. It doesn't happen often, but sometimes one person, I remember at one school, it was really funny. It was the counselor. No, I'm sorry. It was the OT who often wanted to act in the role of the counselor. So she would start asking, how are the social emotional? And then the counselor and the psychologist were looking around like, what is going on? And I would have to stop and go, we need to pause. We need to redirect. I really appreciate your questions. However, we need to take time and finish the meeting, and we need to hear from so-and-so, but we would really love to hear, maybe you could write that up. So know when you have to kind of take control and move things around. And this could happen both with your school staff. I've also seen this happen in family law situations where the parents don't agree, and one parent is being inappropriate with the other parent. And I've stopped meetings before, and I'd say, you know what? I am not going to continue this meeting while you continue to tell me that it's so-and-so's fault that he doesn't do his homework, or blaming the other parent. I was like, this is not a divorce proceeding. And I would stop the IEP meeting. I know I had to do that in 3 different jurisdictions, and I taught in 6, and it was And other people at the meeting kind of all look like, did you just do that? No, if the meeting is going south and it doesn't matter who it is, it could be one parent versus another, where they're using that forum. It's one of the few forums where they still have to be together and talk to each other. And sometimes they use that to hijack the meeting, either like, yeah, you're right. And that's why, and I said, no, I said, I don't see any learning disability, but the mom, but that's only what she sees because he doesn't want to do his work over there. I think if he just tried harder. So they make little digs against each other, and that's an opportunity for you to stop, redirect, and pivot, because that escalating tension can really come off and not be about the child. And sometimes the one parent wants to like sort of side with the school-based members of the team to badmouth the other parent. I've had that happen more than one time where I got along and had civil relations, very civil communication with both parents, but then when they wanted to start talking about each other, I wasn't going to entertain that. I'm like, that is not the purpose of this meeting. We will take a break and come back, and we will have a set of standards. So don't be afraid to do that, however that is, to pause and redirect to move the meeting forward. And if you know ahead of time that there may be contention and things won't be resolved, have a great way to end it so the parent remembers on a positive note that you were polite and respectful and thinking about everybody's time. Again, I compare this to like court proceedings. People can disagree on the procedural issues, they can disagree, but still have that civility and go, okay, I really appreciate that. How about, we're not going to be able to get to this. We want to respect everybody's time. Parents, we want to make sure you have ample time to hear everything. We want to hear your concerns and document them, and then try to either get it scheduled then, or just know, I think we've exhausted everything on this topic. And sometimes there's meeting fatigue. Sometimes you have gone through that OT and the child doesn't qualify. Sometimes the FBA has gone over and the child does need the behavior plan and the parent doesn't agree, or vice versa. So we could say, okay, have that script ahead of time. No, so that people aren't just like, well, it's 1 o'clock. I don't think there's time for anything else. Everybody will send out a calendar invite. Really thank the parent for their input, even if you disagree with them. That is what they remember, because what you're trying to do, obviously, is provide the best programming and support for your children. But procedurally, you also want to obviously prevent those parents from taking action when you can fix it there. I was a consultant with one parent on one team, and we had somebody from the county come to one meeting, and then we realized there was no reason for that. The school was doing everything that the parent, needed the school to do, and what was in the best interest of the child, and was driven by the data. So there was no actionable issue to move forward, because if the parent has ample time, if all procedures are followed, if the data is telling the story, then you have a tight situation. I think there's a lot of misconception, especially with a lot of inflammatory comments online about things, of parents should just take action, take action, take action, when a lot of things are, first of all, as you all know, they're not actionable. And second of all, if you've already provided that remedy or that resolution ahead of time, then there is no reason for the parent to proceed to whatever next step that they would take. I know you all in your state have the conciliation conference. I know, some parents, they're not thinking due process, but maybe they're thinking mediation, maybe they're thinking a state complaint. But if the team is fixing everything ahead of time, then there's no validity to that. So if the parent remembers, they were polite, they were positive, they gave me enough time to speak, they looked at the data. Oh, that's what the data said. The data said that he didn't qualify, as opposed to Miss So-and-so and so refused to have him qualify. So again, looking at the data, being positive, being respectful, knowing when to pivot, and knowing when to say, you know what, it sounds like we need to schedule another meeting. Those are all tips that I think will behoove you. So I really appreciate everybody coming today. I would love to hear in the last few minutes, again, anybody's questions. And I appreciate everybody listening. And if you need more information about me or what supports we provide, pdninja.com. So if we do have a few minutes for questions, I will turn my mic off and go ahead.
Thanks so much, Liz. I just put a note in the chat to please ask questions there or come off mute and ask. Maybe, Liz, if you want to stop sharing your screen, it might be helpful for people to see each other a little bit. All right. Well, we will say thank you, Liz. Erin, thanks for the note in the chat, the reminders and the recommendations. We just appreciate Liz hearing from you and your experiences and hopefully working to avoid some issues and be better able to address others. So many thanks, and thanks everybody for joining us today.